Have you ever wondered what sparks the fire of dissent, leading to widespread protests and civil unrest? As we delve into the ongoing protests in Israel, this is a question we will attempt to address. In the backdrop of a global landscape, the year 2023 witnessed the beginning of the protests in Israel. The spark that ignited these protests was the sentencing of Belgian aid worker Olivier van der Kasteel by Iran on charges of espionage, collaboration with hostile governments, money laundering and currency smuggling. Van der Kasteel's detention and subsequent hunger strike in an Iranian prison triggered a wave of protests that echoed across the globe. As the protests gained momentum, they reached Iran, where they have been ongoing for nearly 4 months. The Iranian protests have been met with severe retaliation, resulting in at least 520 deaths and over 19,300 arrests. This has led to widespread condemnation from countries such as Norway and Denmark. Meanwhile, the conflict between Israel and Hamas escalated, leading to major combat operations in northern Gaza. This conflict, now in its 4th month, has resulted in significant casualties. Over 22,800 Palestinians have been killed, and over 58,000 have been wounded. This tragic loss of life has led to calls for de-escalation and increased humanitarian aid to Gaza from the international community, including the US. In a display of solidarity, pro-Palestine protesters attempted to block a US military cargo ship at the port of Tacoma and port of Oakland. Despite their efforts, the ship was loaded and sent on its way, marking another chapter in the long history of political activism at West Coast shipping docks. This brings us to the current situation. Israel has announced the completion of major combat operations in northern Gaza, shifting its focus to the central and southern areas. The situation in Gaza remains dire, with civilian casualties mounting and critical infrastructure being targeted. The international community continues to call for a peaceful resolution and increased humanitarian aid. To summarize, the ongoing protests in Israel originated from the sentencing of a Belgian aid worker by Iran. These protests spread to Iran, leading to an unfortunate loss of life and arrests. The conflict between Israel and Hamas escalated, causing significant casualties. Despite calls for peace and de-escalation, the conflict continues, with Israel announcing the completion of major operations in northern Gaza. In the face of such adversity, it's essential to remember the power of unity and peaceful protest. In the words of the great Martin Luther King Jr., "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere."